This month on In Case You Missed It, Rhode Island PBS Weekly looks back at the queen of baseball. The Ocean State's Lizzie Murphy rose to the top and once played first base at Fenway Park against the Red Sox. A third of all food grown for human consumption in the United States is never eaten. As part of our continuing Green Seeker series, we take a look at the fight against food waste here in the Ocean State. And Story in the Public Square talks with Mark Follman, author of Trigger Points, about emulation or copycat behavior in those who commit gun violence. All this and much more in case you missed it. Welcome back to In Case You Missed It, featuring some of the best new content from Rhode Island PBS, plus some exciting previews of what's coming soon. First up, did you know that a woman from the town of Warren was the first to play a major league game at Fenway with an all-male team against the 1922 Red Sox? Rhode Island PBS Weekly takes us out to the Old Bowl game to meet the first base star called the Queen of Diamonds.
You're a girl, you can't play baseball. But she loved the game. She was a fine athlete. She could run, swim, ice skate with the best in town in Warren. And she wanted to be around the ball players and carried the equipment.
But the woman from Warren did more than just carry equipment. She grabbed a glove and went pro. Former Harvard librarian Jay Hurd has spent a decade researching the achievements of the female first base player who broke into the men's game. She was born Mary Elizabeth Murphy in 1894.
But she became known as Lizzie, and she had another nickname, Spike. And that came around one time when she was playing on a men's team versus another men's team, and they were poking some fun at her, and they said, all right, Spike, let's see what you can do, let's see what you can do. And she showed them what she could do.
What Lizzie Spike Murphy could do was play ball in the big leagues. She came to be called the Queen of Baseball. As early as 1910, the Warrentown Directory lists Murphy as a baseball player. She was playing with men and impressing them. Newspapers across the country took note.
How did she actually start playing baseball?
Well, through her brother. They would gather at whatever the local sandlot was here in Warren, Rhode Island, and she started playing with them. And finally, she was old enough when they said, oh, and they needed a player. Lizzie, can you cover first base? They noticed her ability, and soon she was being called up to play on the mill teams.
Murphy was raised in a big family next to one of Warren's red brick mills. Her home was where Tom's Market now stands.
She would love to clean the rugs. It was part of how she stayed in shape. She would get her baseball bat, put the rugs over a clothesline, and just beat the dust out of the rugs.
So it was her destiny to be a ball player?
Oh, it was through and through.
Scouted while playing on the mill team, Murphy was recruited by a semi-pro ball club, the Providence Independents. Then she joined Carr's Boston All-Stars, who barnstormed the Northeastern Canada. Hurd says she played 100 games a summer for some 20 years.
Her fielding was excellent. She was not a power hitter, and she often went 0 for 2, 0 for 3, but she hit well enough to be kept on the team, and her defense was outstanding. She wasn't short, maybe short compared to some of the other ball players on the team. She had red hair, which she kept up under her cap.
Murphy knew she was a novelty, yet she had the confidence to promote her status on an all-male team. She wore her name on the front of her uniform and sold picture postcards and autographs to fans after the game.
Well, one of the things I think really sums it up about her is that she avoided frivolity. She was a very serious person. She was committed to playing baseball, and that's what she wanted to do. Yes, she had her doubts early on as to what she was supposed to do with her life.
Those doubts likely surfaced because women in the early 1900s, and to this very day, don't play on men's baseball teams. But Hurd says Murphy decided she just couldn't sit on the bench.
Did the guys accept her?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One of the funny things about the guys accepting, she says that yes, there was a lot of cursing, but she knew all the words, so she was okay with it. She may not have used the words herself, but she was one of the men, one of the guys on the team. She was a teammate. So once she proved that she could play, they stood up for her.
In fact, they backed her when she made a strike for equal rights. The guys were getting paid $5 a game, and even though Murphy was a big draw, she was not paid. So one day, she refused to play for a huge crowd expected in Newport.
And it was a big game. When it came time to getting on the bus, she told the manager, no pay, no Newport. No pay, no play, basically. And he said, well, all right, she deserves the money. So here's $5 for your game, and you can split the receipts with us. So she got on the bus, and there she was, the first professional baseball holdout.
And her story was about to get bigger than the Green Monster. In 1922, right here at Fenway, Lizzie Murphy made history, the first woman to ever play with major leaguers. Murphy stepped up to the plate against the Boston Red Sox for the American League All-Stars exhibition game at friendly Fenway. At the oldest ballpark in the country, 100 years ago this season, she played 2 innings.
And what was the score? How did it end up?
Well, her team won.
Wait a minute. Did the Boston Red Sox know that they were beaten by a girl?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Why is it her story hasn't been told a lot and people don't know her?
Well, I'll be honest about this and say because she's a woman. And that was one thing that people could not abide. They believed women cannot play baseball.
You can watch the full Rhode Island PBS Weekly story on ripbs.org/weekly. From moldy strawberries to uneaten leftovers, food waste plagues our daily lives. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, it's responsible for about 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. On this episode of Green Seekers, we take a look at the issue of food waste and the steps being taken to fight it here in Rhode Island.
At Fort Town Farm in Seekonk, it's harvest season.
Definitely get in a rhythm. That's kind of fun when that happens.
But Ava Agadello knows not all this produce is going to end up at the farm stand.
The farm that we're on grows a lot of corn, and they have multiple acres of corn, and they'll start growing the corn at different times so that it becomes ready at different times. But if we have a super hot summer, sometimes all of the corn will be ready all at the same time, and then the farmer doesn't have sufficient customers or grocery stores or whatever that can actually move that much corn that quickly. So they'll just have more corn than they literally know what to do with.
And that's not the only problem.
Sometimes the food that gets left in the field is a little too big or a little too small. If it's too big, it might not fit in a box. For example, a cauliflower will grow to the size of your torso if you let it. For processing, like if you're selling potatoes to a French fry factory, they need those potatoes to be a certain size and shape and weight to be able to work within the machinery.
So after months of tilling land, sowing seeds, and tending to crops, this extra produce will ultimately die on the vine.
Food waste is a very big problem in the U.S., and everybody eats. And so it goes well beyond what we're putting into our landfills, because 30% of food is wasted or lost before it even gets to the retail or distributor. But they're both talking about economics, right?
The problem is a subject of fascination for Dawn King, a senior lecturer and director of undergraduate studies at Brown University's Environmental Sciences and Studies Department.
They also say pollution is a sign of waste.
Why are we seeing waste happen on farms?
We're very mechanized, and so machines are actually specifically designed, many of them, to only harvest the top 2/3 of a plant.
That's because farmers don't want machines getting tangled in the dirt. Plus, farmers leave behind produce that's less attractive, what's known as grade B.
Once that becomes grade B, it loses almost all of its value. It's not even like it drops 10%, it loses almost all that value. So farmers are faced in this really bad predicament. They want the food to go to others, but they have to pay people to pick it. They have to pay people to package it. They have to get it on a truck and get it to that donation site. All of this costs the farmer money.
And King says the problem goes far beyond the farm. There's also waste from manufacturing, restaurants, grocery stores, and at home. 1/3 of all food produced in the U.S. is never eaten.
In the state of Rhode Island, it's 20% of our total landfill waste is food waste. And so I really try to reframe it and say it's wasted food. Because once we change those words around, we realize we're not talking about trash, we're talking about something that is food that we are wasting.
When food breaks down when exposed to air, it becomes compost. But when it breaks down in a landfill, something else happens.
It rots when it's not exposed to oxygen, like in a landfill state. And when it rots, it creates...
Because it's so piled up.
It's so piled up, exactly. You pile it on top of each other, so none of it is exposed to air. And so it does the exact opposite of compost. It turns into methane, right? You're having a festering methane pile that is 25 times more potent than CO2.
And that's what we're seeing when we see those pipes that are sticking out of a landfill.
Yes.
Those are
Yes.
to let out the methane?
Yes.
So much food is thrown away, King says, because agribusiness and farm subsidies make food less expensive in America than in other countries.
I always tell people, think of the last time you went to maybe your local butcher and got like a really nice steak, like a T-bone, like a really expensive steak. Who ever wastes that steak, right?
Another culprit? Those use-by dates that we all live by.
A lot of people don't realize that expiration dates are not set by the US government. There's actually, except for baby formula is the only food product that actually has a mandated best by date. Sometimes it says sell by, sometimes it says best by, sometimes it just has a date.
You can watch the full story on ripbs.org/weekly. And don't forget to tune in for new episodes of Rhode Island PBS Weekly, Sundays at 7:30 p.m., with an encore on Wednesdays. Next, Story in the Public Square co-host Jim Ludes talks with author Mark Follman about his book, Trigger Points, Inside the Mission to Stop Mass Shootings in America.
Mark David Chapman was the assassin who killed John Lennon outside of his apartment in New York City. And he was carrying with him a copy of Catcher in the Rye. Now, I had heard from popular culture that a lot of other assassins in the 1980s had been found with copies of Catcher in the Rye, and I had never understood why. You filled in the points on that and connected that, and it's something called emulation behavior. Would you explain that phenomena for our audience?
Sure. So this is one area of several. I ended up in organizing the book and studying threat assessment, creating sort of broad sets of behavioral areas that are relevant to the work of threat assessment. There are 8 of them that I discuss in the book. And one of them is emulation behavior. This is known more commonly as the copycat problem, referring to how people who are planning assassinations or mass shootings, in many cases, if you study them, we've learned over time that in many cases the perpetrators are looking to their predecessors for inspiration. They want to identify with them. They want to sometimes use their tactics, and they're seeking ways to go about committing their own version of a crime. And this often involves looking to what the predecessors did, how they acted, how they dressed, what they had. And so that early example was really fascinating to me. Then in the context of assassination, where you had Chapman, strongly identifying with the protagonist of this watershed fiction, Catcher in the Rye. And then after he commits this horrific murder of John Lennon, others who are thinking about high-profile assassination, John Hinckley, and later an assassin named Robert Bardo who killed a young Hollywood star, Rebecca Schaeffer, in 1989. They copied this behavior. They carried a copy of Catcher in the Rye with them. And so this was an important early clue in some of the behavioral patterns that are going on in these cases of assassination. And years later, studying a similar process in mass shooters, the process leading up to those attacks over weeks, months, sometimes even years, you would see emulation behavior. You would see a keen focus on expectations of how the media would respond to a mass shooting, wanting notoriety, wanting sensational news coverage.
Tune in for Story in the Public Square Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. with an encore Sunday mornings at 11. Animal Talk is a new digital series from Rhode Island PBS about our furred and feathered friends. In this clip, host Karen Kalunian talks with Corey Butler from Rhode Island Parrot Rescue about their mission.
Today we're here at the Rhode Island Parrot Rescue with Corey Butler. She's the director here, and we're in the beautiful aviary, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the work they do here at the rescue and how you can go about adopting a beautiful parrot or even right down to a small parakeet. So tell us about the rescue, Corey.
We're in Warwick, Rhode Island. We've been at this current location since 2014. We currently house 70 birds, and that changes.
70
right now, and we're a little packed. And if you're interested in adopting, I would suggest to head to our website, riparrots.org, and click on the adoption section and read through that.
I assume to adopt a bird, it's just like going in to adopt any animal. You fill out application and you go through a whole process here. I know with you, you screen every application and you meet the people several times, I would assume, to make sure that they're a good fit for the birds here. So tell people, is it best to email first? Because I know you don't take walk-ins.
We are closed to the general public, so we are by appointment only, and you will find the adoption application on our website. And once that's submitted, we contact you through email, and that's how the process is started.
And you have all kinds of birds here.
Yes.
I don't think people realize what you have hidden in this little gem here, but you have parrots and cockatoos and
cockatiels
and you name it, you've got it.
Amazons. Yeah.
All kinds of birds. So if you're interested, the best thing to do for you is to email, check out the website, and then you'll set up an appointment for them to come in and look at the birds. And hopefully they'll adopt a bird from you. That's the goal here at Rhode Island Parrot Rescue.
Yes, we're definitely looking for qualified homes.
New episodes of Animal Talk will be released every week this fall on ripbs.org/Animal Talk. And now here's a preview of what's coming next month on Rhode Island PBS. On Generation Rising, host Dr. Kiara Butler chats with author, journalist, and founder of Native Viewpoint, Vincent Schilling, to talk about the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement.
Why is there a widespread silence on the issue? Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, it's uncomfortable. The reality of many things, sometimes people don't want to talk about. We want to sweep things under the rug. We don't want to look at what's really going on. But what a lot of people don't realize is that in the United States and Canada, First Nations Canada, Native American women are more than twice as likely to experience violence than any other demographic. And, very sad to say is the statistics say 1 in 3 Indigenous women is sexually assaulted during her life, and 67% or even up to 70% of these assaults are perpetrated by non-Indigenous perpetrators. But I can tell you, in my circles as a Native American journalist, someone who's interviewed a lot of people in the Indigenous community, I can say I do not know of a Native woman who hasn't been a victim of assault or violence in my career, and I've been doing this almost 20 years. You look at what's known as the Highway of Tears in Canada, where 19 women have been killed on the Highway of Tears, and the serial killer Robert Pickton. There were about 49 women from the Vancouver area murdered by this guy. So the statistics are disturbing and telling. It's very sad.
Yeah, and to have all of this research and these numbers, how is that possible?
Well, for the longest time, it hasn't been possible. And, trying to find actual numbers or current statistics, the latest statistic, from Canada is 5,700, missing and murdered Indigenous women, but that's from a 2016 report. That is 6 years ago. And to find current statistics a lot of times is a struggle. especially as a journalist. I have to dig quite a bit to find, what happened, most recently. And I'm resigned a lot of the times to cite old census statistics or old statistics from, even a decade ago as the most current, statistics on things that happened. It's troubling.
So would you say that our judicial systems are set up to help or protect Native communities?
No. No, not at all. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are people in the law enforcement communities who do care, and there are, lawmakers and legislators who do care. I met with former Senator Heidi Heitkamp in Washington, D.C., who, championed the Savannah's Act and Not Invisible Act in order to create, government resources for tribal communities or tribal officers or those looking to find, these cases of indigenous missing and murdered women. But that's not enough. I mean, if you look at the court case from 1978, and a lot of people haven't heard this, but you can even look it up. It's called Oliphant versus the Suquamish Indian tribe, in which a man was arrested on tribal territories. And it's a Supreme Court case that decided that Indian courts have no criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians. So you ask, well, wait, so Native nations are supposed to be sovereign nations, so why can't we have our own courts? But the Supreme Court ruled that, well, it's not considered a group of your peers, so you can't vote on or have a jury against someone who commits a crime on your land. So this opened it up for anyone. Hey, I could just go to a reservation land and commit a crime and not be busted for it. I'm in. So thankfully, the Violence Against Women Acts reinstitution has stifled that in somewhat, and it's changed some things, but this jurisdiction or this lack of jurisdiction on Indian nations is really, really very troubling.
Yeah, it is. And I'm really trying to grapple with right now how the data is from like 2016, or that you're citing a case from 1978. I was born in 1990, so it's like, why are we still using data that is that old when we're having this topic?
Because people don't want to cover it. People don't want to look into it. That causes a lot of work. And, when we do work or when we get grants or when we do things or we do research, it's about what is most interesting to the public. And the public doesn't want to know about these things. It's just a sad truth to the existence of or non-existence of statistics for Native American and First Nations people. It's something I struggle with, have been struggling with for decades as a journalist. I'm always like, well, where's the statistics? And I have to do my own research. I have to find my own stuff. And it's not easy.
Yeah, so maybe can you tell us more about the red hand? Like, what does that paint represent and how does it tie into the Native culture?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's when we say Native culture, and that's a good question. Thank you for asking. When we say Native culture, we have to keep in mind there's over 572 or 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States, and that number is continuing to increase, and that's not including the state recognized tribes. That's also not including the completely unwritten history of Black Indians, which were or in my opinion, some of the biggest unwritten history in the United States. So you take about all these cultures and all these Native cultures, and myself as a Mohawk, I can't speak for every Native person. You know what I'm saying? I can speak for myself or share stories of people who I've spoken with. But the red hand in many tribes, red paint usually signifies having been in battle, or battle-oriented paint, or a successful battle, or some tribes, tribal members, if they wear red feathers, it shows they've been wounded in battle. or it does show, it can show a killing. In this particular case, the red handprint, I look at it as, and I know someone would agree with me and some would look at it in different ways, is the red hand, in my view, represents someone who has killed an indigenous woman. And to place that hand, to think of there's a bloody hand that is, convicted of murder or has committed a murder, and then still uses that bloody hand to cover someone's mouth to stop further information from coming out. So if you think about it, it's a pretty intense, pretty poignant, statement, is that the bloody hand of someone who's killed is still trying to cover up any voices from getting out. So it's pretty intense in my view.
Watch past episodes of Generation Rising on ripbs.org/Generation Rising and new episodes every other Friday at 7:30 p.m. Please check our listings for dates. Thank you for joining us this month. We'll see you next time in case you missed it.